Every day, millions of Vietnamese enjoy rice noodles in the form of pho, a steaming bowl of beef noodle soup. In the early morning hours, on side streets and street corners, Hanoi's hardworking cooks begin setting up their pho stations. A soup, a meal, a national treasure, pho is a widespread addiction. Many Vietnamese start the day with a steaming bowl of this divine noodle soup. Often mispronounced, but immediately appreciated, pho is pronounced like fur with a soft R. Once the broth is prepared, it takes only seconds to assemble and not much longer to eat. Truly, pho is a fast food that even a dietitian can love. The essence of pho is a beefy consommé flavored with charred onions and ginger, rock sugar, and star anise. When a customer places an order, the simmering broth is ladled over rice noodles, along with the diner's choice of thinly sliced beef, meatballs, or chicken. Scallions, bean sprouts, chilies, and fresh herbs add a burst of fragrance and the layered textures that characterize the best Vietnamese cooking. Whether it's eaten indoors or on the street to the accompanying soundtrack of car honks and scooters, pho perfectly captures the genius of the Vietnamese kitchen. Back from their visit to Vietnam, Mai Pham and Unilever Food Solutions executive chef Steve Gillaba demonstrate the finer points of recreating this invigorating meal in a bowl.
Well, I'm very excited about doing this dish because it's my personal favorite, and I would eat it every day if I could. A couple of things to remember. It takes a while because we're going to simmer the broth, and what we're going to start, you can do this either with beef bones, which is really traditional and much preferred in Vietnam because beef is sort of a luxury meat, and people love to go out and have pho. But obviously you can also do this with chicken. And we have a pot that's boiling right now, so if you want to go ahead and put the knuckle bones into the water, what this process does is that it will clean the bones first. So you want to blanch the bones. I'll get you some tongs here.
And we're doing it in boiling water.
We're doing it boiling water. And then we have another pot in the back here ready for you to transfer the bones. So you want to put the bones inside the boiling water and bring it up to a boil again. Knuckle bones are good. You can also use oxtails. I like to use a combination, but definitely the knuckle bones give a really wonderful, rich, real good flavor, real wonderful richness to it.
And this really goes back to the classical way to make stock. So that must come from, I don't know where it came from. I know there's French influence, but it goes back to classical way of making stock.
I'm going to turn the heat up a little higher because we put a lot of cold bones in there. And a lot of people don't think about when you're thinking about pho, and for that matter, really Asian soups. If it's a broth soups in Asian cooking, it's very desirable. And in fact, it's really where it's at. It's in the clarity of the broth. And so the broth should be very flavorful. It should be beefy, but it can't be, dark. And so
cloudy.
It cannot be cloudy at all. So after a while, when it goes into the big pot where we will make our broth, we're going to have to watch the fire. In Vietnam, the families would stay up all night.
Right, you don't want to let it boil.
No,
and really the boil is
not a vigorous boil.
That's what makes things light simmer, light bubbles, and that's really what makes stock cloudy.
So, so definitely what you don't want to do with the bones is you do not want to brown it first in the oven and put it in here, because that would be creating a very cloudy broth. The idea is to basically blanch it, cleanse it a little bit up, and remove any kind of scum and debris. We will still have to keep an eye on this pot here, and we'll have to skim it off when we see all the foam that comes to the top.
On the top, and you just keep skimming, and that's what makes a clear broth.
Right. You can put the meat in here too. And what I like to do with the meat is, like a chuck roast would be really nice. In Vietnam, we'll use a brisket. And yes, it's a little bit fatty, but you're only wanting the flavor. Much of the fat, any of the fat that you see, we can trim it off, or we can skim it off from the soup pot later on.
Right, and you want little tiny bubbles of fat, if I remember. Sometimes
Yes,
there's
just a little bit.
They say like fish eyes, just a few little things that kind of deliver a little bit of flavor.
Right, because you have to remember that this is a meal in itself. It's a meal in a bowl, and so this is all you're eating. This is all the meat you're eating, and this is all the fat that you're going to consume for this particular meal.
And it ends up a small amount of meat.
Very small amount when you think about it. Okay, so that's boiling. So you go ahead and I'll help you fish this out and transfer it over here. And so it's not a particularly difficult dish to make, Steve, but there are a lot of little nuances to it that you have to pay attention to. Should simmer for about. So now that we have the bones in the broth, right, we're going to get ready and char some ginger, some onions, and some shallots. Shallots because they're much more intense than onions, and onions are nice because they really sweeten the broth. They're really nice. And this process, you just basically char them. You could just char this right directly over the fire. I'll leave this.
So it's very
here.
quick.
Very quick, very hot. Let's just leave it over here. And of course, you can also use a screen if you're doing a larger quantity. Maybe that's what would be nice. And we'll just basically char them. And the idea is not to cook through; is just to create a little smoky flavor right at on the surface.
Surface of it.
There's a lot of flavor right on the ginger skin. A lot of vegetables and a lot of fruits. The most intense flavor is right
Within the skin, right?
within
that
the skin,
first layer,
right?
you
Yes, exactly. So that's what basically we're trying to do here. Turn this. This is what you're looking for because remember it's going to cook for about 4 minutes. Okay, so that piece is good. I'm going to go. I like lots of ginger. Lay it right there. And I'll do a little bit more of this shallots here. This is all you're looking for, not to be cooking it too long. This is a really nice color.
Yeah, just a little bit of caramelization, get some of that sweetness out of that.
And with this, and it's sort of the essence of Vietnamese cuisine too. You want nuances, you want nice aromas, you want layers of different fragrances. Not so intense. If you were to burn this, char this, and it's all black, it might be too smoky, and therefore interfere.
Turn bitter and
right, and interfere with the nice
flavors,
subtle
right.
flavor.
And it was a blend of flavors, or kind of a symphony of flavors that they really blended very well in your mouth.
I'm going to reduce this, and before we turn that back, you want to roast. Okay, so we got this. We're going to add it to the soup. Okay, now we are going to roast the spices. I'm going to turn this down a little bit because this fire is really hot. Okay, and you want to be able just to feel the heat a little bit, but not more than that because it could scorch very easily and turn it really bitter.
Again, bitter. So you got your star anise, your cinnamon.
Cardamom, yes. Fennel, right? And coriander seeds and some cloves. So you see some cloves here, right? And the essence of Vietnamese pho is really in this flavor, in star anise. You definitely can detect that. And in the background, you'll be able to taste the wonderful, subtle notes of coriander seeds, a little bit of Vietnamese cinnamon. This cinnamon, I don't know if you...
And we have a regular cinnamon here, so you see the...
Oh, good. We can compare that. You could use this, and if you were using this kind of cinnamon, I would use less, just a very little. This is much sweeter, has a higher oil content. It's very aromatic, right? It's very sweet.
Yeah, no,
and
it's
very
very sweet.
This is very strong cinnamon. So usually when I use that, I would decrease the amount. And I can feel that it's getting a little warm. Sometimes people don't know when, if you start seeing smoke, it's really too hot.
Well, do you look for a tiny bit of a haze to come out of it?
Just barely.
Just barely to come out?
Okay,
I can smell now, yeah.
You can smell it now, so if you want, we can put this in. And I have a little spoon over here. You can try to gather them up and put it in the bag.
So are we going to use all this?
Yes, we are.
For the one pot?
Yes.
That's pretty amazing.
It looks like a lot, but it's really not, really.
Well, I've been experimenting a little bit and trying to make it, but I didn't use this much spice at all. So now that's what the great lesson is all about.
Okay, great. You do want to be careful that actually the star anise sometimes can be very overpowering. I personally like it on the kind of on the hard spice side. In northern part, where in Hanoi, where the dish originated, people love to have their pho very subtle. Do you remember that when we were in Hanoi, in that alley where the family was making? It was mostly a beef broth, right? And then I think that you said that you probably prefer the one in Saigon, the one that we went to, which has more
spice to it.
More spice to it, yeah. And here you go. And you know you could use this bag. It's easy because you can fish the whole thing out, or you can just dump the whole thing and then strain it later on. So we can do that. And actually, why don't we dump this into the pot?
You want to go this way?
Yeah, right.
So
why throw it away? Yep. No, you can go ahead and add this right now.
Okay.
You can have the whole thing. Here you go.
Here's my tongs. It's okay because it's going to cook, so it's okay if I use my hands there a little.
Right. And you know that I would probably not put the spice bag in. You could put this in. Not the spice bag in for 4 hours. I like my spices in only for about 2 hours. It's sort of a personal preference, but I feel that when you put the spices in and it cooks for a certain amount of time, it starts to dissipate. And the flavor will still be there, but it's not as vibrant. It's more homogeneous. It's like blended kind of flavor.
So do you believe in your philosophy, and maybe not, this is maybe your overall philosophy, that you kind of layer some spices in there sometimes?
Yeah, because I think one of the
different levels.
Right. One of the wonderful things about Southeast Asian cuisine and Vietnamese cuisine in particular is that it's very flavorful, but yet it's not pungent. And you do that by cooking spices a certain way, and don't put it in too much, don't cook it too long. They all become kind of a little bit overpowering sometimes, a little bit too pungent, a little bit too much homogeneous. It all tastes kind of blended, whereas in Vietnamese cuisine we kind of like
you want spikes. You want spikes is maybe a bad word, but you want different levels.
Different levels, right? Yeah.
But it is kind of spiking little different things in your mouth. And
yeah, exactly. So we're going to let this cook, and it'll start to boil. And when it boils, what we want to do is just keep skimming. So in Vietnam, people love to. The family would stay up all night, and they take turns watching it. And what you don't want to do is you don't want ever to, for example, traditionally it's made over a wood fire. And sometimes it just sparks and starts burning. And so, the people always, the pho cooks are always watching the fire for that reason, because they don't want it to boil, because that spoils the whole pot and it will spoil the whole day's work for them. So we're going to let that cook for about 2 hours, and then later on we're going to add the spices in there. Okay.
So I'll get a little bit of that scum off the top of there.
Right, yeah. So you see it will continue to simmer, and then as it simmers, you smell this wonderful
the aroma's starting to come out there. You're getting that beef aroma now.
Yeah, but you're also getting some of the impurities out, and so you want to make sure that we skim that off. And this is really the important moment in pho cooking, and something that pho cooks in Vietnam pay a lot of attention to, and that is the way that this is probably a little bit even
too high, right?
Even a little too high. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit, and you want it to bubble. You don't want it to boil. That's probably the right amount. Okay. At this point, you want to go ahead and put the spices that you roasted earlier, right? So that goes in. And you can put this in until the very end, but like I said, I like it kind of like at about 2 hours. And so if you were to cook this pot for 8 hours, you would put the spice in the last 2 hours. That's sort of a personal preference. You could probably go up to 3
hours.
And some people like it at 4. I don't know, my palate is such that I like to be able to discern all the different flavors in there, the coriander, the cumin, and the cinnamon. At this point, we're going to put some fish sauce in there. And you notice is that the brand that we're using is a Vietnamese brand, and the Vietnamese style is much lighter.
Much clearer.
Much clearer, and the Thai is more intense. And for this particular dish, it likes a very delicate flavor. So we'll put some fish sauce in at this moment. We're not going to season it totally because it's still got a ways to go. But this gives it some body right now. And you want to add a little bit of sugar. And while you do a little sugar, I'm going to put a little salt in there. Okay.
Good. Or do you want me to go a little more?
Maybe a little bit more. Okay.
And we'll check on.
Yeah. And then we're just going to let this go for a little while. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start our pot. Let's say if this is ready, then you need to get your bowls ready to assemble it. So in a college, university setting where you have maybe cooking exhibition style, you take the pot the broth that's already made out there, keep it on a low roil,
heat.
and then you have another pot with rolling boiling, really vigorous boil. That's where you're going to dunk your noodles. So let's go on to that step.
Okay, great.
This is coming along really beautifully. Our water is boiling away there. We have rice noodles. If you're using dried rice noodles, such as this one in the bag, what you can do to expedite it. Yeah, that's you see here it says size medium or large here. Actually, it says large. That's large. If you kind of like a wider
Noodle?
linguine style noodle, I probably like a little bit smaller. And here we've soaked it in water for at least 30 minutes, and so what that does is that helps to cook it a little bit faster and take some of that excess starch out.
And it goes very quickly. And I remember over there it was only fresh noodles. It was
Everything is fresh there. So go ahead and just put a little. Now the proportion is very important. You want to have 1 portion of noodles to 4 parts water. So you want the bowl to be kind of filled to the rim almost with liquid. So that's probably good for this bowl. Yes, that's probably enough. No more than that.
Okay.
Go ahead and put a little bit bean sprouts in. We do this at the restaurant. You don't have to do this. In Vietnam, they don't do it.
They just do it raw and they put the broth
Yeah,
up.
I do it at the restaurant because I kind of like my noodles to sit a little bit higher, and so that when I put the meat on top, it shows off really well.
Okay.
Okay. So now here's a trick that we always say. You really need this, Steve. You have to kind of stir it around, and what you want to do is basically washing the noodles, cooking and washing and rinsing, right? At the restaurant, at Lemongrass Restaurant, when we do this, one of the things that I'm really a fanatic about is to make sure that you really rinse it well. Otherwise, it'll dilute the flavor of the broth. And you want it to be in the, you don't want to do it too quickly because you want to completely cook off all the excess starch. So when you bring it up, make sure you do it like the way we do it in Vietnam, that is just bang on the sides. So make sure that all the excess water, it's kind of like cooking pasta. If you still have water in the pasta, your sauce is not going to be that great, right? Okay. You transfer that to a bowl, right? It's very important that the bowl is hot or preheated. In Vietnam, we kind of like pull the basket, put it in the bowl. Remember how they did that? And they pour it back in?
Pour it back in.
Okay. So you got your nice noodles in here. Okay. So do you want raw beef or cooked beef? You probably want some cooked beef. You probably want both.
I think a little bit of both.
You probably want combination.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and
And that's what we had.
Yeah. So go ahead. So this is the beef that we cooked in this stock earlier, right? So you can use like a chuck, very small amount. Some onions. I kind of like a lot of onions, and here it's very important that they're cut no thicker than this. They have to be paper thin, right?
You want a nice sweet onion if you get.
Right here. I kind of like a lot of green onions. It looks like excessive amount, but it really isn't. We'll go ahead and put the meat in here. Okay. Do you like some raw beef too?
A little bit.
Okay, a little bit. Okay, so then we'll do that. And
when we pour, both, right?
Right, when we pour boiling broth on it, it's going to cook the meat instantly, right?
So we got right in that pot there.
Right here.
And also, I noticed when we're over there too, sometimes they put the raw beef in the little ladle and just stirred it real quick.
Actually, because they want to make sure that, over there also, because the beef is not as nice as this one that we can get. The beef over there is kind of a little tough, and they want to make sure that it's kind of somewhat cooked. Otherwise, grizzly, that's not well done.
And I know you said in your restaurant you actually use...
we use the New York steak.
New York strip,
which this is. And basically, yes, this is how you do it traditionally, right? So you help cook it a little bit.
Just a tiny bit.
And actually, and then what you do is you want to make sure that this customer gets the real sweet meat broth. Right. So here we go. And usually when you do this, you want to make sure you don't get any fat in the broth, okay? And usually when I pour it in, I like to pour the sides. I don't like to pour it on top because I like all the meat to stay in one side. So this is how it's typically served, right? You can do a little bit of black pepper. This is how they do it in Vietnam. You want to go ahead and, traditionally in Vietnam, it's served with some hoisin sauce and some chili sauce, sriracha sauce, so you can put that in here. A little warning, this is a personal thing. I don't really like this very much in my soup because I like, you see how
how
clean,
clean,
how clean, right?
How clean that's going to be, you know,
It's
I
very
think it'd mask
clean, and I
it.
kind of I kind of like it like that with just a little bit, a squeeze of lime, just not a whole lot. Be very careful. A little bit of that, and you, of course, to eat, you would shred, you know, all the fresh herbs in here, right, with your hands. And by the time you're done prepping, oh yeah, put some of that
What's that?
saw leaf.
Saw leaf in it?
Yeah, saw leaf herb in there. And I'm kind of ready to dig in because my hands smell really good, right? And I'm going to get you a little spoon. Okay, so when
Yeah.
you push it down here, this is a clean spoon. So you go
Well, it
ahead and
looks
taste
great.
it. Yeah, I'm going to taste that with you too.
And if I want a little heat, I could use a little bit
Oh,
of
actually, I
chilies.
do like a heat.
I
Do
know
you like heat?
I know you like a little. You actually like a little more heat than I like.
Should I put a little bit
little
in?
bit. Of.
Okay, yeah. There you go.
So when I start turning red, then you know I
Yeah.
had.
Well, I just put 3 rings in
No,
there,
that's
so.
yeah, that's probably my speed there.
Isn't that nice?
It's really, I mean, just nice and smooth. You're getting the herbs, the green onions, the light beef notes. I mean,
Yeah.
the warmth of the spices.
Right, and the whole idea is when you're served such a big bowl, we probably, you know, could put a little bit more broth in here, but it comes so hot that you'll get all this steam, and the steam sort of rises and embraces your face, and then your fingers smell all this wonderful fresh herbs, and that's the true pho experience. And I think that if you serve it that way, you're giving your customers the full experience. So, very important. Everything is done very thin. Broth is very hot, clear. Serve it in a bowl, a big bowl, so you can keep the heat in there. Lots of fresh herbs if you can get it, but let's say if you can't get the saw leaf herb, try to get at least the Asian basil.
Asian basil.
But you know, I've been in places where you can't, sometimes in the winter when it's a little bit hard to get Asian basil, it's very delicious with cilantro and all
and
the
other
condiments.
herbs,
Yeah.
sure.
Remember though that in Vietnam, in Hanoi, where this dish originated, people there are very much into what a bowl of pho is supposed to taste like. And even though there are lots of fresh herbs in Vietnam, the people in the north,
didn't use them then.
No, they didn't use because they think herbs mask the flavor of this wonderful
Of the
beef.
richness of the beef that's
Yes.
you know, it's a sought after piece of meat.
Yeah.
For them.
You remember that one
Yeah.
place that we went and they didn't have any herbs, and but in the South, the difference is in the South is that people love their pho. It's a regional difference. People love their pho with fresh herbs, lots of fresh herbs. And in the southern part of Vietnam is where you will find such an abundant amount served at
Oh.
a table such as this. You won't find this kind of amount served in the central part. Not as much, and as you go further north, it'll
You
be
see
less and
less
less.
and less and less.
Yeah, because people really like the pure taste.
And actually less spice as you go up.
Right, and it's also because of the Chinese influence is much more prevalent in the north. It borders, you know, China, and we have a lot of steamed food, some stir-fry foods, and things that are probably more similar to southern Chinese cooking, like Cantonese cooking, like Hong Kong style. The Cantonese cooking that is so popular in this country. But what a great dish, right? And as you can see, not terribly difficult to make, but you kind of have to pay attention to all these little details that make a real big difference.
And you also told me that you could do it with chicken.
That's
I know
right.
We had some
and
chicken
actually, you know,
there.
there is such a thing as a combination, and in this country, customers love combination toppings and combination soup and salad. But you can also put some fresh chicken in there if you like. You can also do this with tofu. You can make a nice vegetable broth. And if
With
you,
that same warming spices and so.
right, if you char the onions, char the ginger, make a broth similar to what we did, but do with a vegetable stock, you'll get a beautiful pho too. Especially if you serve it with some mushrooms, like shiitake mushroom, to give it a little body,
Yeah,
and some
right,
tofu,
give some flavor,
like
right.
seared tofu. But great.
Fantastic.